Have you ever met someone for whom it seems like the rules don't apply? The sort of person that sees a queue and immediately walks to the front of it as if they're too important to join the back. The sort of person who drives through the light that's already turned red because they're on important business. They're in a hurry. The sort of person who during a national lockdown drives out to a castle in the northeast to check their eyesight when everyone else is stuck indoors. Some people seem to think that the rules don't apply to them. But in 1 Timothy 1, Paul seems to suggest that the law really doesn't apply to everyone. Let me read you a couple of verses. We know that the law is good if one uses it properly. We also know that the law was made not for the righteous, but for lawbreakers and rebels, the ungodly and sinful, the unholy and irreligious, those who kill their fathers or mothers, for murderers, it goes on. Now, the law that Paul is writing about is God's law given to the Israelites at the time of Moses. It was the foundation of how that nation lived. So what does Paul mean by saying it was made for the unrighteous and not the righteous? And what might that mean for us now when we think about being freed from the law through Jesus? It goes way back to creation. Human beings, you and me and everyone else, we were made to have a relationship with God. We were made to have a loving relationship with God that also manifested itself in loving relationships with each other. God gave his people the law, and when he did this, it was supposed to help them to love him, to love others. Jesus said the law could be summed up in 2 commands: to love God, to love your neighbour. The law was designed to help people to love. And when they didn't know how to show their love for God, their worship of him, the law taught them. When they didn't know how to be loving towards each other, especially in the middle of arguments about property or whatever else they were arguing about, the law showed them how. And they needed this because the truth is they didn't really know their God. They'd been slaves in Egypt. Their freedom to worship and teach about their God had been curtailed. Their ability to set their own rules and boundaries had been taken from them. They needed to learn who God was again and what he expected. Fast forward a few thousand years to now, and we proudly proclaim as Christians that we are no longer under the law. We are saved by grace through the actions of Jesus. And that is true, and it is good. And yet Jesus still gave us commands. And for the same reason. Those commands are meant to show us how to live in proper relationship with God and with each other, how to love. When Paul says that the law is for the unrighteous and not the righteous, that holds true as well. At the time of Moses and today, if you have a proper loving relationship with God, following his commands is easy, it's natural. You don't have to strive to obey his commands. You don't have to put a list of his commands up on the wall and think, I really must not murder today. Because if you have a proper relationship with God, obedience to the will of God flows out from that. Loving him and loving each other is a natural consequence of a proper relationship with the creator of the universe. But if your relationship with God is rocky, if it's a struggle, as it is for all of us, the law, the commands of Jesus, the rules, they help guide us back into his presence. And because none of us are yet perfect, we all need these commands to keep pointing us towards God. I've got this image of my head of, when you go bowling with small children and the barriers come up at the sides, and there's the law, there's Jesus' commands funneling us towards our proper relationship with God. In John 14, Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commands. And it's a cyclical thing, because obeying his commands help us to love him, and loving him helps us to obey. So yes, as Christians, we are freed from the law by the grace of God. But we should still obey his commands, live in his way, because that's what it means to have a loving relationship with the creator of the universe.